Hi everybody, Steve Cady here, and we are with Nexus for Change. I have quite a few friends and new friends that have joined us today. We're doing our 30-minute high-impact webinars, and the focus is on practical tools that you can use today. And our title today, or our topic today, is 3 questions to design meetings and events that matter. And so we're going to have 3 parts to our webinar today. The first part is going to be to review the tool and just the basics of the tool and how to use it. And the intention is that you can use that tool right away. You should be able to apply this afternoon or today or tomorrow. The second part will be to show you a case example and show the tool in action. And then the last piece will be 10 minutes for Q&A and having some conversation. We'd like to use the chat feature, so you know in Zoom, you can see at the bottom of the chat box, you can click and just reflect, say hi to somebody that you see that's here, ask a question, react to stuff, say, oh, that's cool, or I use this here, or here's a cool link to a neat article on this. We're going to be sharing with you links to articles and templates and stuff as we go in the chat, so you can use that. And you might have something to say, wait, that's crazy what you're saying, Steve, and I don't totally agree with that at all. I think that is just sheer lunacy. That's what Teo says to me sometimes, and Carol too. So, but we'll just have a nice conversation in the chat. We can use that to set the stage for our third part. So let's jump in. So the root of all change is design. The question is it intentional or unintentional? And a lot of you out there that do this work, we know that the whole idea about, a vision without action is a dream, and a action without a vision is like a rudderless boat, those kinds of analogies and so forth. And when we think about change, it happens. We oftentimes go through the process, and we also know that when we look at our thinking and our cognitive processes in our brain and how it's structured, we got system 1, system 2. If you look at the book that's out there, which is Thinking Slow and Fast, really does a nice job of talking about the cognitive science behind decision making, and how a lot of times system 1 level thinking is quick, automatic, and system 2 is more thoughtful and planned. And so we're focusing on using the whole brain as we go into designing anything from a 1 to 3 hour meeting to a 1 to 3 day event to a 1 to 3 month project or projects and a 1 to 3 year initiative. And I think of these like Russian dolls. You see that all major change initiatives are built on 1 to 3 month projects, which are built on 1 to 3 day events, which are built on 1 to 3 hour meetings. And they weave these engagements in a collaborative fashion together to create that practice for change that many organizations strive to have. It's some type of intentional practice around how they manage the transformation of their organization, the revitalizing of their community, or developing human potential on a large scale. So have you ever, and I'm looking at Rick's face right now because he's on there and a friendly face, and I can imagine you have, and we've all been there. We have people that walk out of a meeting, and they say, "Why was I there? What just happened? Why am I even here? What was this? What was this about?" Or somebody else would say, "Hey, we don't even have the right people here. How are we going to make decisions when we don't even have the right people here?" Or you left something and you say in a very appreciative inquiry and positive psychology perspective saying, I take the weather wherever I go, and I choose in this situation, even though the meeting and this event was not very useful or helpful to me, maybe even a waste of time for most part. What's that? At least I got one nugget. A friend of mine would often say, I always look for just that one nugget. So I can at least have one thing that I can use. As long as I got one nugget, it was worthwhile, even if it was mostly a waste of time. Or you have people saying, I'm here, and all you're doing is manipulating me to a foregone conclusion. This whole process is just about being taken to where you've already decided. And so we've been there. And so Ron Lippitt worked with Kurt Lewin back in the day of behavioral sciences and the founding of the field and of OD and change, organizational development change. And Ron Lippitt would often say 3 questions before you get people together, before you take off on an initiative with a group of people. What is the purpose? Who needs to be involved? And what conversations need to take place? Powerful 3 questions. That's what we're going to focus on. And if you can answer these 3 questions before you have any conversation with anybody, anywhere, 1 person to 1,000 people, if you can answer these 3 questions, you're going to avoid these kinds of comments, you know? So let's move to the opposite of those comments, right? I know why I'm here. Man, we got all the right people here. I'm so glad that we're all here making sure we're getting this thing done together. I got so many nuggets, I don't know what to do with them. Where do we keep all of them? This is so helpful. And man, I really feel like I was a part of the decision because people support and defend that which they help to create. And thank you for wanting me to bring my wisdom into this conversation so that we can make something really powerful happen. The gentleman that developed Twitter and was talking with another friend of mine, and they were talking about how do you invite people to events. And it says, just basically say, we want you to come on behalf of the people that you represent. We want your voice to be here because it matters. So when you invite people to something that matters, where their voice is going to be used, where it matters, inviting them, saying, come on behalf of, people feel that the reason for coming is different than being manipulated to a foregone conclusion. I'm actually going to be a part of creating and innovating something that actually is going to be better because we're together. So the 3 questions. The first one, what's the purpose? Couple tips for asking the question, what's the purpose? We're sitting down, we're designing a meeting, and let's say we have an intentional design meeting where we have a group of people to design a meeting that's happening next week or next month. First, I want to have a representative sample of those people that are going to be at that meeting sitting in the room as we ask the question, well, what's the purpose? Well, the best thing to do is not start with purpose. Start with the outcomes or the benefits we want to get out of the time we have together and have an outcome conversation, which will then be gained up to the purpose statement for the event. So what you do is you say, how much time do we have for this? Well, we have approximately an hour, maybe 3. Maybe we have 2. Okay, so in 2 hours, at the end of the 2 hours, what do we want to have accomplished at the end of the 2 hours? What do we want to say we got done, or what were the benefits, or what came out of the meeting? And we got to think of outcomes, not activities. So we don't think of what we did at the meeting. We want to think of what happened at the end of the meeting. We want to think of what was the result at the end. Let's not, the agenda, which is coming up. And the third question, we want to wait for that. We want to talk about here at the end of the 2 hours, what has been accomplished, what's different. So you make this laundry list. And as everybody's brainstorming and making the list and you're crafting the statements, it sometimes takes a lot of time to get these outcomes identified. And you leave them down to, let's say, 3. And then you ask this question, if all 3 are accomplished, if we accomplish all 3, what's different in the world for us? And that's that purpose statement. Sometimes people will say one of the outcomes, and somebody else will say the outcome, and you find yourself coming back to one of the outcomes, and what you realize is you've created a purpose statement in your list of outcomes. You just take that outcome, bring it up top, call that your purpose statement, and then you have your outcomes below. Couple tricks. If you have an outcome that is a activity, you just say, well, we're gonna review the financials in order to what? If people have this wanting to get into the agenda, well, then just take the activity and say, we're gonna do that in order to. Or we're gonna get that through what? You know, so you use this in order to help shift an activity to an outcome. Another concept is if you go out and Google levels of abstraction, it's really a great and helpful way of thinking about this, because what you're doing is you're taking outcomes and you're looking at the next higher level of abstraction of those 3 outcomes or 4 outcomes. And you take those that one level of abstraction and go up 1 notch to the next higher level. Next thing is, who needs to be involved? Well, the intention for this image is to recognize that everybody has different roles. There are people that are going to need to be at the meeting the whole day. There are some people that might need to visit the meeting and speak for a few minutes. There might be some people you need to hear from. There might be some people that you bring in via video. There might be a variety of different roles. You have leaders, you have frontline workers, you have managers. And when you bring them all together, who needs to be in the room? Purpose and outcomes drives that, and recognizing that they have different roles and different links into, but engaging them as appropriate, like having leaders be a part of it in a way that fits for them, sharing their wisdom, and also maybe observing helps to create that support and buy-in, as opposed to Well, they can't sit at the tables, at all the tables. Well, then how do you engage them? And maybe as a panel or those kinds of things. That happens in the next question. But the most important thing is here is to think about who needs to be involved. You might want to go look up RACI in the project management world, RACI. RACI plus, is it P, Teo? Yeah, is it F, RACI plus F?
F.
But go check that out. We're going to do another tool session on that in the near future, just on RACI. So the next piece is what conversations need to take place. This is where you get at the agenda. So you have an agenda for a meeting, you have an agenda for a 1 to 3 hour day event or hour event or 1 to 3 month project or a 1 to 3 year initiative. But essentially, it's a series of conversations that are, interspersed with action and activity and people going to work and coming back together. People converge together for a meeting and diverge out for action, converge back together for a meeting and diverge. And the longer and the more complicated it gets or complex the changes, the more you have a lot of these converging meetings and meetings that matter. It's not meetings for a waste of time. We don't want to have meetings where people are being talked at. I really advocate flipping meetings and having the work, having the rote reading and reviewing of information done and having people do that before they show up to the meetings. It's like flipped work in organizations and so forth. So here's a plan as a tool to organize the questions. PLAN, because it's just easy. It's easy to remember. And what you do is you say, what's the purpose? Who are the leaders and the participants? Like, who needs to be involved? What's the agenda, A? And then what do you need in terms of resources, logistics, materials, money, budget, even to behavioral agreements and so forth. And you can use this little acronym to help guide. I used one before called PODER, P-O-D-E-R, and CEO was looking at me and said, I hate poderizing stuff. I just love the term poderizing, but he hated it. And he said, this stinks. And I said, okay. And then all of a sudden, PLAN emerged as another way of organizing the questions. And then they loved it. So PLAN is a tool that kind of helps to organize the 3 questions plus what you need in order to do the 3, do the event.
And I added a little resource link in the chat, Steve.
Yeah, so you'll see resources in the links. We're putting articles in there, links to different kinds of things. So let me share with you this little case study. And we're somewhat on track on time, which I'm glad to see. So now, in South Africa, Arian, one of my favorite people, when I went with the Change Handbook to South Africa and started doing a bunch of workshops down in Africa and South Africa, in particular on the collaborative processes and techniques, I got to meet him, and then he and his group there, they started using things. And those of you that are looking in this room are seeing kind of the individual group whole design where you have tables of right there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people sitting at a table. This is an actual group. It's the regional office of the South African Information and Communication Technology Company. And so here's the issue. They implemented a strategy that is focused on improving service delivery and support in an attempt to improve customer satisfaction. They were about ready to lose a multi-million-dollar client, close down the customer service facility. People would be out of jobs, and this employer happened to be, their client happened to be one of the biggest employers. So it's like this small town in South Africa was really dependent on them keeping this client. And any break in service delivery, because they were technology service, any break was called, which resulted in a reset of the number of incident-free days. So what happened is you have incident-free days, like days without accidents, if you will. And so think of these as accidents in technology. And so the goal was to have a lot of incident-free days. And they the management and leadership decided to announce 80 days around the world. We're going after 80 incident-free days. I mean, they were having like 1, 2, and 3 days between incidents. And so they decided to launch this initiative, make the edict, 80 days. They had a cool cookout, which is called a braai. They gave some great t-shirts out. They had some cool banners and all kinds of stuff. And they waited, and Well, they got to 24 days in one moment, but really they didn't get anywhere. And they were about to lose the client. And their purpose, if you think of their purpose for this initiative of the Bri t-shirts was to get people to do the 80 days around the world. In other words, to get 80 incident free days. But there was the purpose did not lead, and this intervention did not lead to the result that they needed. So they began to say, look, we have a different purpose in mind. We need to engage your people in creating the solution because they have the wisdom. And we need to do it in an accelerated fashion so they can solve the problem and figure this out with you. And management did not believe or trust that they could do it. They were so worried and would not engage the employees because they didn't feel that they knew how to solve the problem. However, their back was against the wall. The recommendation was bring them in the room. Let's do an event. And so what they did is first here, this was the back against the wall stuff. This is employees became discouraged. They didn't support or understand the guidelines for the initiative. This is the stuff that was happening after they did the Bri and the cookout. And the employees interpreted it as just another management intervention. And you know what they wanted to do before their back was against the wall, this was happening? They said, let's do another Bri and make bigger banners, more t-shirts. Let's just do more of it, and bit brighter colors, and let's do another big party. And they're like, no, it's not going to work. We need to engage them in an event that is going to really tap their wisdom. So here's what their back is still against the wall and they're still worried. They're not getting any results. As you can see, the best is 24 days. So they said, let's use World Cafe. Let's take and bring them together. Let's use the change formula, DVFS, which is another tool that we'll talk about, to guide the conversation. And let's move to a 2-hour intervention, take the time we have, bring 90 employees out of a possible 120, and get them in the room. And management was like, okay, it better work. And when they did the event, management came in nervous. They were like all the leaders came because they were worried what was going to happen, like some type of rebellion or something bad was going to happen. So they did the round of conversations and they did the World Cafe and they did the technique following the DVFS. So this is the agenda. So now they got this purpose. Let's engage people. Let's engage people in a way that they co-create the solution so that we can actually solve the problem and get better results. Who needs to be there? Our employees, leadership, managers. We need to get them all in the room. What conversation needs to take place? Well, we need to have a 3-round conversation focused using the formula to kind of guide the conversation, the DVFS formula. And we'll put in the chat a link to an article on the formula that explains it. But D is dissatisfaction in a common database. V is an ennobling vision of what we aspire to achieve here. F is first steps, things that we can do starting Monday to make progress on this vision that we hope for. And S is how do we sustain the results? How do we make sure we follow through? Let's have the 3 rounds of conversation and let's talk about this. Interestingly enough, as they began to have the conversation and management is watching, all of a sudden he jumps up and says, let's form a committee right now of employees. All of a sudden, the manager understood the power of engaging the employees by being in that meeting. So what happened? They had the World Cafe event. They formed a team to represent the group, a representative group to help organize the ideas to make it. They connected with the employees and they started rolling it out, and that's what happened. They went to 25, to 44, to 68, to 81, and they went up to 120 days and counting at the time of this publication. 2-hour intervention, World Cafe, purposeful intervention of bringing people together. What did participants have to say? A perfect opportunity for interaction with other employees. It felt good to participate in something like this. I often feel that we are just sitting in our offices doing our job, but we don't really communicate with the people around us. And this created that opportunity. I didn't feel like just an outsider anymore. Another person said, employees could contribute without fear of victimization or retaliation, and they added suggestions on how to improve the current program. In a normal forum, like the official site communication session we have on a monthly basis, you're not given an opportunity to air your views, seeing that we could cause others to air their views and speak the truth. So a purpose that said, let's bring people together to engage them in co-creating a solution, helped to frame up the who needs to be there and the agenda. Opportunities for alignment, resulting in participants taking ownership of the program. This was the first time it was really communicated well. People could see and understand what it was about. And just this communication already made a big difference. It is more fun, not as rigid as it was before when management initiated. It now belongs to all of us. People support and defend that which they help to create. And when they create something together, it's usually better together. So, questions, reactions? Taya, what are you seeing in the chat room? Rick, I would love to put you on the spot and say, what are your reactions and what maybe is a question you have? And those of you that are here would love to have you all, Leonie and Holly and Todd and Ron, I'd love to have you all ask questions if you'd like to live with the few minutes that we have. So Rick, you want to check in?
There. Is my mic on?
Yes.
Great. Well, first of all, I loved it. First, I appreciate how succinctly you went through some really powerful stuff. So just that alone, forget about the content. The process you used is really good, which is also a really good plan for meetings. Too often, something like this would be stretched out over 3 hours. And so I thank you for that. One of the things I really like about it is when I'm actually preparing a course right now, and how this whole thing, the way you describe it, is in the language that people can use. It's not in consultant language. And I think that's wonderful. I mean, too often we get so wrapped up in our own terminology and we impress ourselves, and you're obviously being impressive, but you're doing it in the language that I could see people in South Africa or anywhere nodding their head and going, yeah, that makes sense. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, Rick. Any questions that you have?
I will, in 10 minutes, once we hang up, I'll have 5 questions, I'm sure. I don't have any questions.
Yeah, and I totally welcome that.
Right now, yeah.
That's absolutely welcomed.
There was one question from Leonie who is asking, I'm wondering how this generalizes to small groups and how do you decide what the questions are?
Hi, Leonie. Do you want to unmute so we can chat? I can unmute you. Would you like me to? Yeah, there you go. So could you ask the question again?
Well, you're on the fly. You're in a community context. You obviously asking good questions is a critical skill. You actually had some initials, DSV, SD, as if they stand for particular categories. And I'm just wondering how you design those questions, especially on the fly.
So I think I'm understanding. So the DVFS, in the chat, we have a link to DVFS. It's called the change formula. And in that article that you have there, I did with my co-authors, we looked at the history and looked at the history of this formula that is widely used around the world to guide change initiatives. And it's a nice framework to kind of keep in the back of your mind, you know, when you're talking with somebody or you're watching. It's a good lens through which to kind of think about change as kind of, you know, a checklist, if you will, and so forth. So the article lays that out and gives a lot of details there. Your second question, like on the fly, in the moment, let's say I'm in the moment and a meeting is like a group just walks in the room. I would pause and say, let's do a quick, it depends on how many people are there. If there were 50, I'd break into small groups. If we had only a little bit of time, I would, again, if we hadn't done any design work, I would probably very quickly pull on what I know and say, here's the purpose and outcomes for today. Here's who's in the room. And here's our agenda today. And I would get right to them talking to each other around a critical question. but I would at least ground them in, here's our purpose, here's why you are here and why it matters, you know, why it's important to have you here. Here's what we're going to do over the next 30 minutes. And I would get them, I would pull from my toolkit. If I didn't have any time and I was just thrown in a room, I'd pull from my toolkit a question to get them talking about whatever the issue is in a way that they're talking about it. And I think a great question is to say, it's kind of a two-part question. Actually, it's three I would do. It's now I'm thinking about it. Who am I? Why does being here matter to me? Why does this topic matter to me? And the best one that David Isaacs loves to ask is, if I could get this question answered today, it would make all the difference in the world for me or for us. So here's a question that if it was answered today in the next 30 minutes, it would make all the difference for me and for us. And then I would have them do it in small groups, or I'd have them use liberating structures. If you go check out liberatingstructures.com and Keith McCandless's work, they got lots of little tools for having those questions used, having people move around and talk. And then I would try to bring that out to have that help guide the next conversation. I'd be inventing on the fly, but I would like use that and I'd be thinking, okay, the next tool. What I would be doing is I'd be following the formula, the change formula, because I want to get them all connected around a common D, common dissatisfaction and a common desire for change. I'd be moving them into a direction. What's the vision that we want? What are we yearning for? Then I would move to what kind of actions can we take? What first steps? F, what first steps can we take together? And S, how do we support us in following through on what we just committed to? When do we come back together to meet again? So I do something like, I would use the DVS formula in my back of my head to guide my design of my agenda. DVFS oftentimes does a really nice job of guiding me and checking the outcomes when people are discussing and doing a design team meeting to design outcomes. I'm oftentimes looking to see if they have outcomes in the DVFS areas for the particular event, but they'll put it in their own words.
So where does the formula come from again, sorry?
You check in the article, because it's a formula that's been around for 50 years. It's got its roots in a Herb Shepard and a group way back when out at MIT. It's evolved. Kathy Dannemiller popularized it into DVFS to make it more accessible. The article that's in the link there, you can click on it, will give you the whole history, story, and definitions.
Brilliant.
I do want to point out also that there are 2 links to our next webinars. We're having another one of these 30-minute sessions next week. There's a registration link and a keynote webinar with Warner Burke that you can participate in. And again, in the chat are the specific links for the DVFS formula, for the article that talks about the case example Steve shared, as well as some resources for the PLAN.
Yeah. So the webinar with Warner Burke is with our new doctoral program at BGSU. We have a new professional or executive doctorate in organizational development and change at BGSU. The residency based 5 times a year. It's a really exciting program. We've had a great response and some amazing people. The average age in this group is in their late 40s, and they've got 25 plus years of experience. So they're coming together to do these professional doctorates to build their thought leadership in the world, and to turn their subject matter expertise into new content, new things to deliver. Any other questions, Teo, before we say bye?
I did not see any additional questions. Thank yous from Ron, Holly, and from Todd. So thank you guys for participating so much.
Yeah, thanks everybody for being here. Do we have any closing questions? Because we are done. Any closing comments? Nope.
Terrific.
If you are looking for any additional resources or materials, please check out Nexus4change with the number 4.com. There's a contact form. Feel free to email me, Theo, Theo, at nexus4change.com. If you didn't get to any of the links, I'll be happy to provide this information to you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Great, everybody. Have an awesome day.